Now we start the program in earnest, and we're going to be looking at the Constitution review. Nigeria may soon witness the second amendment to the 1999 Constitution. The submission of the report of the Presidential Committee on the review under Justice Alpha Belgore marked the roundup of the executive side of the process. And you may have watched live yesterday that particular event and what people had to say about the proposed amendments. To look at that with us this morning, we have two legal practitioners, Mr. Dele Adesina, SAN.
Good
morning, sir.
Good morning.
And our in-house lawyer, so to speak. Now, don't get me wrong, he doesn't work for channels.
Because I've got people call me and say, when is channels opening?
Mr. Malachy Ugwummadu.
It's my pleasure to be here.
Thank you for joining us again this morning. A number of issues were raised. Chief among them were the issues about state police, devolution of power, state creation, and others. But in many people's minds, the question now became, because they were talking a lot about true federalism. We must practice true federalism. Mr. Adesina,
Yes.
to your mind, what exactly do they mean by true federalism? Let's start from there.
Well, thank you very much. Let me quickly chip it in that we have actually had first, second, and third amendments of the Constitution. So they are embarking on the fourth process.
Okay.
Coming back to your question, true federalism is a concept. The definition may not be exact in terms of 2 plus 2 is equal to 4, but there are ingredients, there are elements that will establish what we call true federalism or an ideal federation. An ideal federal system must avoid over-concentration of powers at the center. There must be a fair and shared distribution of powers. The federating units must be autonomous to a level that they can take decisions and they are not dependent on the federal or on the central government for key decisions. They must be free to formulate policies and execute them on matters of local concerns like education, like construction of roads, like agriculture, like census, and so on and so forth, like internal security, even of that state, including the establishment of the state police. These are some of the ingredients. There must be a non-interference between the federal and the state. And we have had incidences of such interferences in the present setup quite a good number of times. A very quick reference can be made of the establishment of local governments in Lagos State under Asiwaju Bola Ahmed Tinubu, when the federal, with all its weight and might, frustrated that process, which was a legitimate expectation of the Lagos people. It was a classical example of interference. Now, we also talk about there must be a fair representation of these states in such a way that one does not dominate the other. In other words, the component units must be such that each can exist viably. They must be viable and visible. They must not be divided in such a way that two can conspire against one, like we had in the First Republic. These are classical illustrations. At that time, we had 3 regions. You have the northern region, you have the western region, and you have the eastern region. And in fact, the northern region was bigger in size than the eastern region and the western region put together. This was not a balanced federation. And in a quest to do that, they created additional region. Surprisingly, from the smallest of the 3, the Midwestern region was created from the west. And later the military took us to 12, from 12 to 19, from 19 to 36. Unfortunately, Our application of federal system has been a bundle of contradictions. Originally, as far back as 1946, 1951 Bodilon, 46 was Richard Constitution, 51 was Bodilon, 54 I think was Mapperson Constitution. You know, each of these people, particularly 1951 Constitution, Bodilon recognized that Nigeria is a conglomeration of many tribes, languages, cultures, religion, and so forth. And so they thought that the best thing to do should not be to impose a system on these people. They sent out questionnaires to provinces, to villages, to everywhere. Do you want a powerful federal system? Do you want a system that will devolve executive and legislative powers on the regions? Or do you just want a mere adversary regional legislature? At that time, they recognized that the idea of federal system in Nigeria is not breaking one huge nation into three. No. They said it is infusing so many innumerable small units into three, and ultimately from three into one. That was the original conception. But under the military, we reversed that. We now began to divide that big into 12, from 12 to 19, from 19 to 36. In some areas, without recognition of the tribe, the culture, the language, and so on and so forth. I'll give you an example there. Presently in Nigeria, there is the Ekiti state, and there is the Kogi state and Kwara state. As we speak, there are people with full-blooded Ekiti culture in Kogi state, and they have their kith and kin in Ekiti state. You see, those are the contradictions and problems you run into when people are not made to participate in the decision-making process of what concerns them. I don't know if I've been able to answer that question.
Well, somewhat.
Yes.
This issue of devolution of power, it seems to be the main issue. There's a clamor for removal of so much power in the center, which seems to affect everything, including sharing the you know what I'm talking about? National cake. What is your take on that?
I think that is at the root. It is the main thrust of the discussion. Even what the learned senior advocate had clearly explained comes to that by way of conclusion. And it also explains the dominant consideration in examining the question of federalism, as you put it. In a true federal state, you operate by recognizing the juxtaposition of the same power at different stratas of governance. And the constitution that regulates the operation of that federalism defines that power, gives it its character, delineates it, and also share it among these component federating units. So at the core of the question is the issue of power. Our problem has been that whereas we pretend to be operating a federal constitution that recognizes the devolution of state power, you know, along these tiers of government, the reality on the ground is an unholy concentration of the same power at the federal. And the simplest way to identify that in its full swing, without being a lawyer, is to open your exclusive legislative list. Just open it. You see, I don't come to channels or any other stations carrying books, but I have about 5 different constitutions here, ranging from I didn't come with US constitution, I came with African constitutions. Uganda, Ethiopia, South Africa, and so on and so forth. Just so to further dramatize the lies that we keep telling ourselves, and for which reason we are remaining where we are. Now, but I think that the core of today's discussion has to do with the so-called constitutional amendment. They must tell us whether they are talking, because in some quarters you hear constitutional review, in some other quarters is amendment. When you were introducing, what we have, going by the letters of what has happened, is alteration. Learned senior advocate, informed that we have had 3, and that is the truth. But they are known as alterations to the 1999 Constitution. First alteration, second alteration, and the third alteration. Indeed, like he said, they are now, on the 4th missionary journey in altering.
Now, if
the question therefore would be, what do we need at this particular critical time in the Nigerian